Deep within the Blackwood forest, the abandoned sanitarium stands, its windows like hollow, judging eyes watching the pines. My name is Sarah, a nurse who took the night shift here, unaware that the building itself breathes with malevolence. The air in the ward tastes of rusted iron and ancient pine needles, a combination that settles heavy on my lungs. I approached the isolation room, the floorboards groaning under my boots as I clutched the patient file tight to my chest. Sarah noticed that the room number on the door was not etched in metal, but carved deep into the wood by something with sharp, jagged claws. I pushed the door open, the heavy hinges screaming in the silence, revealing a patient sitting upright, their face obscured by the dim shadows of the flickering emergency light, absolutely motionless. The patient did not turn as I entered, staring intensely at the wall where the wallpaper was peeling away in thick, vein-like strips. I whispered a greeting, but my own voice sounded distorted, as if someone else were speaking through my throat, echoing off the damp concrete walls. The room smelled of stagnant water and old earth, far removed from the sterile scent of a normal hospital, making my pulse quicken uncontrollably as I moved closer to the bed. As I stepped into the light, the patient finally turned, and I froze. It was not a person, but a grotesque amalgamation of bark and pale, human-like skin. My breath caught in my throat. My hijab felt suddenly stifling as I backed away, but the door behind me had vanished, replaced by a wall of living, twisting roots. I screamed, but no sound escaped, only the rustling of dry leaves from my own open mouth as my skin began to feel rough, turning into rough, splintering wood. I looked at my own hands, seeing my fingertips stretching into long, wooden thorns, while my uniform fused into the rough texture of a pine trunk. The hospital room was melting into the forest floor, the ceiling dissolving into a canopy of dark, suffocating branches that blocked out the sky entirely. Panic surged, but it was quickly being replaced by a strange, vegetative calm, the silence of the woods drowning out my last human thoughts. The patient began to laugh, a sound like branches snapping in a storm, and they pointed toward the corner of the room that was now a dark thicket. I saw dozens of other nurses, their bodies fully encased in the bark of the ancient pines, their faces forever frozen in silent, agonized screams. This was no hospital. It was a harvest ground for the forest, and I was just another seedling to be planted in this decaying, wooden purgatory. I tried to run, but my feet were already anchored, roots snaking out from under the floorboards to wrap tightly around my ankles. I felt the earth claiming me, pulling my consciousness down into a cold, dark place beneath the soil where the forest whispered secrets of death. My vision blurred as the last of the hospital lights finally flickered out, plunging everything into the eternal, suffocating darkness of the deep woods. The plot twist was not that I would die, but that I had been a tree all along, dreaming of being a nurse. The hospital was merely a hallucination created by the forest to lure the living, and the memories of my shift were just stories told by the wind through the needles. I felt myself settling, my consciousness fading into the slow, steady rhythm of a pine tree that had stood for centuries. Centuries passed in the span of a heartbeat. I watched seasons change, my branches swaying in winds that tasted of long-forgotten human fears. I saw other travelers enter the woods, searching for the legendary hospital, their eyes full of hope and curiosity. I could not warn them, for my voice was only the creaking of timber and the soft, mournful rustle of my needles in the night. Sometimes, when the moon hung low and red, I could manifest the illusion of the ward again, a cruel siren call to the weary. I would mimic the sounds of sirens, the beeping of monitors, and the frantic footsteps of a nurse, weaving a web of false comfort. It was my duty, my penance, to add to the grove of the lost, ensuring the forest never ran out of souls. Tonight, a new group of explorers arrived, carrying flashlights that cut through the darkness like surgical lasers. They were looking for the haunted hospital, their laughter echoing loudly, oblivious to the fact that the trees were listening to every word. I focused my energy, feeling the familiar, painful shift as my bark skin softened and rearranged into a human form. I stepped out from behind a massive trunk, my form flickering like a bad television signal, a pale, tall figure in a white nurse's uniform. I wore a hijab that seemed to absorb the dim light, my face a mask of artificial serenity as I beckoned them toward the center of the grove. They followed, their cameras recording nothing but the shadows, unaware of the trap that was slowly closing in around them. As they entered the clearing, the illusion of the hospital manifested fully. Walls appeared, tiled floors materialized, and the sound of a distant, humming generator filled the air. They stepped inside, their faces illuminated by the bright, sterile glow of lights that didn't exist in reality. I closed the door behind them, the wood knitting together with a wet, sickening crunch that they dismissed as simple structural settling. They reached the nurses' station, finding charts that listed their own names, their own histories, and their own exact times of death. The realization hit them all at once, their faces twisting in terror as the walls began to pulse with a dark, organic rhythm. The floorboards shifted, roots erupting to snake around their legs, pulling them toward the dark, hungry earth that hungered for more growth. I stood at the doorway, watching as the forest reclaimed its guests, my own form starting to stiffen and return to its wooden state. The screaming was muffled by the thick, encroaching vines that wrapped around their mouths, stifling their cries for help. Soon, they would be part of the grove, standing silently alongside me, waiting for the next group to arrive. The forest fell silent once again, the illusion of the hospital dissolving back into the twisted bark and shadow of the pine trees. I felt the sap flowing in my veins again, a cold, slow circulation that marked the end of another cycle of hunting. We were the trees, we were the forest, and we were waiting for the next soul to wander off the beaten path. The cycle continued, a never-ending loop of deceit and transformation, with the forest growing ever larger and more crowded with its wooden victims. You might think you hear the wind, but it is only us, whispering your name, calling you toward the trees. Beware the blackwood, for once you enter, you never truly leave, you only become part of the scenery. So next time you hear a strange sound in the woods, run, and never look back at the trees, for the hospital is always watching. My name is Sarah, and I am the forest, and I am waiting for you to get lost in my dark, beautiful, eternal embrace. Good night, and may you never find the path that leads to our ward.